Welcome back to another episode of MBA Mike. On this episode, I'm going to interview Bob Mwaniki. Bob is a consultant working at McKinsey in Nairobi, Kenya. He has an engineering background from the University of Nairobi. He worked briefly in Seattle for Boeing, and he also worked as a developer for some time. So to get started, Bob, do you want to explain to the audience your journey so far and what brought you to the MBA?
My journey so far. I've had a bit of an interesting journey. As you mentioned, I started off thinking I'd be an engineer. For the first few years of my life, I was very sure that that's my life. I was going to be probably climbing electric poles, trying to figure out electric designs for the grid. And then at some point, I got the opportunity to change to aerospace, to Boeing, which I thought would be a 3-month internship, ended up being a 1-year stint in Seattle. So I thought, okay, now I'm going to be an aerospace person. And then my visa ran out, and then I came back home. And in the midst of trying to figure out what to do, I thought I'd go back to engineering, and my journey took me to software development for a couple of months, and then thinking very sternly that, okay, now I know what I'm doing. I changed careers again, and I ended up being at McKinsey doing consulting. So journey is sort of all over the place. I'd love to say I know what I'm going to do next, but who knows?
So it wasn't intentional, your journey into McKinsey consulting?
I have two ways to explain it. There's the more rational approach, which I've done sort of post rationalizing how I got into McKinsey, and then there's the real reason, which is I just stumbled into it. The rational reason was that I like solving problems, and that's probably why I did engineering. The more abstract, probably the better for me, and it sort of fits within my skill set of logical problem solving with data. Then that's why you tend to find a lot of consultants tend to have engineering backgrounds, so that's why.
Right. Do you think that's because of the applied problem-solving mindset that engineering brings?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. There's the can-do attitude. If you've ever met engineering students, you know that engineering is not the easiest of things to do, to pursue, especially when you're young. And the fact that you go through that rigorous process just means that it's, we've had it worse. So there's a sort of can do. There's also, there's the applied problem solving that you're taught and is sort of ingrained in your mind. There's the affinity to structure and data that people who are engineers naturally gravitate to. So you find that there's a good mix of skills, and that's why I think most people who end up doing it tend to be engineers, although that's not exclusive. I've seen anywhere from doctors to lawyers to chefs to anyone becoming consultants. It's not a prerequisite.
Yeah, and do you think the engineering degree brought about the problem-solving mindset, or do you think the mindset took you to engineering because you saw that as exciting?
It's sort of which one came first, the chicken or the egg? I think for you to do the engineering degree, it helps if you have an affinity towards numbers. It helps if you like breaking things apart and putting them back together. It helps that you have those natural skills. Does it mean that if you don't have those natural skills you couldn't do engineering? Probably not. You could do it, might find it slightly harder. But as with all things, we are all sort of built different. So if you feel that you want to do engineering because you have this affinity, go for it. Even if you still like it and you don't have that affinity, it might just be slightly more difficult. But I think both help is a short version of the answer.
Yeah. And a lot of people, about to do an MBA are thinking of consulting as a career option.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you've already done that, do you feel that your potential as a smart engineer is used appropriately as an analyst as an associate at McKinsey?
I wouldn't qualify myself as a smart engineer. I just think I'm an engineer.
If you did.
If I did, in the world where I would consider myself smart, I think Yes and no. Yes, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, you are put into situations that you have a lot of times very ambiguous problems to solve, and you have to figure out a way to structure that, and it helps. The engineering degree has helped me a lot in making that structure sort of part of my life. No, in that it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to do an engineering degree, depending on which country you're in. There's a lot of technical things, right, that I've learned. I have never had once in my life to save voltage in McKinsey, although that is a concept I have had to grapple with for 5 years and do very, very complex circuits and do very technical things. So obviously I don't use that. However, I mean, there are some projects. So if I'm doing like power projects, for instance, I have a deeper understanding, a deeper appreciation of the complexity of the problem versus other people. But you don't go deep enough, because what brings value as a consultant is not you giving the most accurate formula, I would say. It's probably advising the people who will probably be five, 6 levels above the engineer to make the right strategic decision. So that's why I say yes and no.
Yeah, but do you feel, in terms of the impact that you have with your job, in any other career you might have been able to have a larger impact, or do you think this is probably the most optimum type of impact as an engineer?
Depends on how you define impact, I suppose. Impact can be defined as, do I think in Kenya, do I think I would have had opportunities to debate and talk and argue with decision makers? Probably not as an engineer. I'd probably sit in my cubbyhole, make some designs, give it to other people. It's other people's jobs to decide the strategy, and right. So I'd have a very micro level impact as an engineer. However, one could also argue that is real work. I've come across people who would say that management is just layers and layers of inefficiencies. I might disagree, but in one hand, you might have people who say, yes, as an engineer, you have much more impact because you actually do real work and you push humanity further, or your society further. On the other hand, you might have someone who'd say, that's true, but if you never push at a macro scale the decision making, what impact do you have? So I see both sides of the argument. So I tend to lean for, in the part of the world I come from, macro probably is more important, because we are not at the bleeding edge of technology anyway. We're taking designs and things from other parts of the world, with the exception maybe of software. Maybe that's, you could say. But so for my specific use case, yes, I don't think I would have had impact elsewhere. For other people, it might not be applicable. As with all things, this is all situation context.
Yeah, and based on your experiences so far, what have been your top 3 experiences, your favorite experiences from consulting?
Top 3?
Yeah, not specifically, but what about consulting have you enjoyed the most? What are the qualities of consulting?
Okay, in no particular order, I would say the first is the people, probably. I have never come across such a large concentration of very, very smart people. It is amazing that, and this tends to be from all over the world. It's in consulting, at least from where I work, you can literally call up someone in India or Russia who has a very, very unique expertise, and they will be more than happy to help you out. A lot of these people, most people think that, or I assume that most people will be brilliant jerks, so Dr. Houses of the world. most people I've met are really, really nice people. It's a sort of person you'd want to hang out after work, and it's surprising how many of them are in, at least where I've worked. So the people, if nothing else, that has been the biggest and probably the most fun, intellectually fun I've had. Second is probably the problems that I've gotten solved. So in most types of work, you are given a task, and you probably run with that task for years, right? Unless you change jobs. So in consulting, it's probably like having 20 jobs within a year, because you're moving from project to project, and each project sort of pushes you it pushes you to a level of discomfort that you're not used to, which rarely happens with any job. So that aspect has been really, I guess, as much as I don't enjoy it when I'm doing it, when looking back, sort of hindsight is 2020 type deal, I enjoyed.
Yeah, and how many projects have you had, sorry to interrupt, per year? You mentioned it's like having 20 jobs, but surely you must have not had 20 projects per year?
No, 20 projects per year is obviously exaggerating. I would say on average, a project might last anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months, assuming it's 2 months, so that's 6, maybe 7 projects a year. So given that I've been there for a couple of years, I would say maybe 30 projects, roughly. I need to go back and check.
Okay.
Yeah.
And finally, what's your final favorite part?
I guess I call it the perks. So the perks being access to CEOs and CFOs. There is no way in such a young part of my career I'd be able to have access to this type of people. The travel obviously is nice. It wears off quite quickly, as most people don't realize, but in the beginning it's quite nice. You also get exposed to a lot of different cultures, different people. I mean, of course, we are all in our own bubbles of corporate consulting, but there's all other types of perks. But I'd say the perks that come with the job are, of course, very, very nice.
Yeah. And what would you say are the top 3 worst parts of life in consulting?
Top 3 life parts. Again, no particular order. I don't like calling it like work-life balance, but the number of, you need to be really dedicated to it. It does take quite a lot out of you.
Would you say that's similar to having your own company? Like, I mean, in terms of dedication, or is it more than that? Is it about the hours? Is it about the emotional attachment to your projects?
I don't know that I can compare it to having your own, being an entrepreneur, because if the possibility of failure, but the results of failure or having your own thing are much larger personally and reputationally versus being in consulting. So I think that is probably more of a drain, if I'm honest. They are in terms of hours put in, depending obviously on the project and on the business you're trying to set up, they might be similar. I think for me personally, it's not the hours per se, because I mean, we're all hardworking. If you enjoy it like I do, you're gonna put in the hours. I think it's more around the fact that it's sort of relentless, right? So you will move from one project to the other. Sometimes you just want a break, but there is no time for you to get a break, or you've been called in odd hours of the night. There's just one of things that sort of push you slowly, and after doing it for a while, if you pushed, I don't know, a meter every day, eventually that becomes a very long distance. So I think it's just how often it happened that sort of got to me. There's ways to deal with it. I think a lot of firms right now are finding that sort of the mental issues that have come as a result of it, the burnout, and are being a lot more receptive to the ideas and feedback they're getting. But of course, this is it's an industry that's been there for a while. It's going to take systemic change. I don't think in my lifetime it'll change. So it's one of those things everyone complains about, but if it was such a big thing and everyone hated it, everyone would not be there.
Yeah.
So
well, McKinsey consultants are known to leave in a couple of years, so there might be a reason there.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue
people abandon consulting faster than they abandon their own companies.
I mean, you could. It's not just a McKinsey problem. I think it's a consulting problem. I mean, you could argue there are many reasons for it. It's not just that the work is a lot. It could be a lot of people also find opportunities that are more interesting. A lot of people also, one thing with consulting, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you will never truly see your idea to fruition. You might have a great idea, but you're on to the next thing.
Yeah, because you're working on a strategy level.
You're working at a strategy level. And at some point that might start to bug a lot of people. And it's fine. And you leave and you try to do your own thing. You might be successful, you might not, but you try. While in consulting, you just have to be comfortable with whether the success or failure of your idea is not yours. So, and sometimes you just get, with this, as I said, you're having conversation with C-suite people, CFOs, CTOs, chief CDOs, and you become friends, and they you enjoy working with that person, and you want to continue working with that person. There's many opportunities. I've had arguments from some people that it could also be part of just the business model of just getting people in and people out.
Yeah.
Can you really have, I don't know, if there are 10,000 people, how many can truly become partners? You can't have 10,000 partners. Maybe not. I don't know. Eventually people leave for different reasons. I would not like to say that there's a particular reason that makes people leave. And I'm not trying to point. Everyone knows about the work, the sacrifices you do need to make. It's becoming clear that if people want to retain the talent, they have to be cognizant of that, of that problem, and they're trying to work around it. Work that is worth doing is always going to be hard. It's unfortunate. It's just the way the world works. So.
Yeah, and what are your other two worst parts of life in consulting?
Funny enough, as I said, the travel does get to you. I was fortunate that it didn't get too much, but you can imagine especially if you have children, if you have a family, and you're constantly not there, that might weigh in your decision on whether or not to leave or stay. I don't know what happens because I left consulting for the MBA just at the height of the pandemic. So I don't know how much the Zoom acceptance has become part of consulting. I suspect to some degree, but not too much, because building trust over Zoom is really hard, and especially if you're trying to get not only a sense of what the problem is, but you're also trying to have some sort of impact, not just give a pretty document, but actually mean that your client will implement, then you probably need to be there. So I guess the excessive travel and I guess it's also it's a different way of saying the work-life balance, but the excessive travel can get to you.
So that pro is also a con. This broad exposure can be a con because you're constantly having to go there. I need to think about the third one. I'm grasping at straws. I'm sure there's a third one somewhere. I mean, there's an association problem, right? I guess there are some things I would love to tell my friends and family and wife about, but I can't. There's NDAs I've signed. There's confidentiality. There's a sort of even if you do, I think it comes back to the idea. Even if you come up with something, it can never be truly yours. So I have no problem with it, but I see some people have a big issue with it. So even if, for example, you saw that there's a great niche area in Amazon that a external player could come and grab a large market share of, you could never implement that because you've signed an NDA and said you're never going to use that information for your personal gain.
Exactly. I mean, that's one thing, and even if you hadn't signed, you can't stay in consulting and do it. You have to quit and try.
Yeah.
So,
of course.
Yeah. So yeah, you are, I guess, subjected to, you see a lot of very sensitive information you can't use, which is a good thing. You can't use, but also that means you have to be very ambiguous with your when people ask you, what are you working on right now? I can't tell them. I'm just like, I'm working in X industry, and sometimes because there's so few players in that country, I can't even tell them. I can't tell them which country I'm going to.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, you become this really suspicious, cultish person.
Right. So if you say automotive sector in Ghana, there might not be so many.
Yeah.
By the way, are your projects all related to Kenya, or do you work on international markets?
No. So most. In my firm, we are part of an Africa pool, so most of projects tend to be around Africa. For obviously, unfortunately, unlike Europe, where pre-Brexit, where the sort of work visa situation is very fluid, and you could basically work for a project anywhere. In Africa, sometimes the visa process is difficult, so you find that priority might be given to the people within that country or near that country, just for.
Makes sense, yeah.
But it's not because of, it's an administration thing. Yeah.
And looking back, what do you think you could have done differently that might have helped you on your career journey?
If nothing else, if McKinsey Consulting has taught me that being uncomfortable is really key for growing, and a lot of times where I just was happy to be content and just sort of coast along. I would say that it is, even within consulting, there's a lot of times where I could have probably pushed myself, gone for that extra dinner that would have unlocked a door somewhere else. So being uncomfortable, or being in situations that make me uncomfortable, is probably one of the things I would have changed.
As in, you would have done much more?
Yeah, I would have done much more. I would have talked to a lot more people. I tend to be a very comfort-seeking, introspective, introverted person. So
if that's your personality, then maybe that's just the way things should be for yourself. If it makes you happy. I think retrospectively, when we look as an introvert or maybe even an ambivert at what I could have done, you do not feel the resistance of if I go out tonight, I'm already really tired. You're thinking about the benefits, the pros, but you tend to forget because you're not feeling the pain of that day, of all of the other things you've been doing and the rest that you need probably for your own health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, as with all things, there's balance to be had. I think it is very easy to give excuses for yourself, even if it's a slight discomfort. I still feel that even if you are an introvert and you want to stay home, you can do that most of the time, but you shouldn't be like all 52 weekends of the year. Everyone needs to, of course, will find their own balance. There is obviously, as you said, sort of bias of looking back, that you don't realize a lot of the things that you were doing at that time were painful. But my general sense is that when things are painful, they probably, at the very least, you learn something. And I don't know how many opportunities in your life you have to learn.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.